Welcome back, everyone. It's officially 2024 and I'm ready to get back to work on our Trackday Supra. Today we're going to install a radiator, a surge tank, an oil cooler, a new lower radiator pan, and we're going to make our own ductwork. The stuff that's already in the car that came with it when I acquired it was mock-up parts. The radiator's mounted a little bit high, the mounts are kind of ugly, and the ductwork is hideous. I'm not happy with it. We're going to pull all of that out, we're going to fabricate our own ductwork and get these parts mounted by the end of this video today. Thanks for joining me. Now this is the ductwork and the radiator that came in the car when I acquired it. I'm not exactly happy with the way it looks. It sits kind of high, and as you can see, the edges were rounded over to get the hood to clear. I think it's kind of unsightly. I'm not happy with the way it's mounted. This radiator has no oil cooler on it in any way, shape, or form, so we're going to remove that. I've already unbolted everything. This is going to come out and go in a scrap pile. The mounts for this radiator are down here. They mounted them just under the edge of the frame rail. I have made a radiator pan that's going to sit on the splitter bar like more current cars use today. So we're going to remove this ductwork. That's coming out too. We're going to build new ductwork. I'm going to roll the car outside. We're going to cut these mounts off on both sides and completely remove those. Our new radiator pan is going to sit on this bar between the left and right frame rails, and that's going to hold our radiator in place. Then we'll build our ductwork out from there to the actual opening in our grill flange on the bottom. Let's roll the car outside. We'll cut these off. I'll buff them down with a flap disc. After I cut them off, I'll touch up the paint, and then we'll get into mounting our actual radiator pan. All right, now I've got both of those tabs removed. I've cleaned the frame up, buffed it down with a roll-lock disc. It looks really good. I touched up the paint. Now I've trimmed up my radiator pan and notched the corners. We're going to install it. We're going to test fit our radiator and see how everything fits. Now this pan sits lower all the way down here on my splitter bar. It's got two brakes in it, and I've left a flange on it for my radiator ductwork. I'm going to mock up my radiator. I'm going to drop it in here, see how it looks. And if I like the way it looks, we're going to move forward from there. What I'm going to do right now is drop the radiator in. I don't have the oil cooler on it right now. It's sitting over on the bench. So I just want to test fit it. And I think that's too far forward. And I think that looks ugly. So Left to right is fine. We've got plenty of room. What I think I'm going to do is move the radiator pan back to the back edge of the splitter bar support. And that should allow me to move my radiator back about another 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches, and it will help me with installing the radiator ductwork. So let me mark that, pull this radiator out, we'll trim it, and we'll test fit it again. What is it, buddy? What's the matter, huh? What? You okay? I believe I can safely pull 1.5 inches off the back of the radiator pan, and we will be good. So let's pull that out and do that. All right, so I've notched both ends of my radiator pan on the back to clear the down bar for the splitter. We're going to try this, see how it fits, mock up our radiator one more time. If everything goes well, we will mount this tray and then we'll start working on the ductwork. And that looks a whole lot better. Let me grab the oil cooler, see how the oil cooler fits. So it's been about a week since I started making this video. I had to stop in the middle of it and finish hanging a body. I'm back on working on my radiator pan. It's been trimmed and it fits the chassis exactly the way I want, and the radiator sits where I want. We need to move on from this, but people are probably wondering, why did I make a radiator pan and why did I not mount it to the frame rail extensions themselves? Back in 2007, the revolution of stock car racing was the car of tomorrow. That was a game changer for the NASCAR Cup Series. Many teams went away from mounting it to the frame and building framework to mount the radiator on its own to a radiator pan. The radiator pan, like this one, this came off of one of my Hendrick cars. This came off of my Casey King Great Clips car. This mounted to that splitter underneath the nose of the car. The ductwork was on top of it, and the radiator sat on the edge of it. There was an extension bar that came up and mounted it to the frame rail. It ended up evolving from this even further. This is one that came off of one of my Joe Gibbs cars. This started out as a 1-inch thick solid aluminum plate and was machined down. This was milled out in the front. There's actually an angle and a slope on it here because when it was mounted to the splitter, the back of it was the leading edge was mounted to the splitter and the back of it was raised so that the radiator was level. On the bottom, you'll see some countersunk Allen head bolt holes. These were used to mount the radiator between it. They came up and mounted to the frame rail, while the front of this, where the floating nut plates are, mounted specifically to the splitter. I've seen more extensive work done on these. I've seen some that were, believe it or not, made out of titanium. I've seen some that were made out of magnesium. I've seen some that were made out of carbon fiber. Teams were always trying to outthink each other and outspend each other, and it's kind of one of the reasons we ended up with the next-gen car today. So, up next, we need to make the radiator ductwork. This is the ductwork that was in the car. I've deconstructed it and made templates of some of the stuff to help make my new ductwork. On the top here, I wrote down my final dimensions. I made a couple templates. I took all of that stuff, pushed it to the side, and I made something new. This is the new radiator ductwork that's going to go in our car. I've clecoed the grill bezel mount in the front of it. This actually mounts to the exterior of our bumper cover, and the flange on it mounts to our ductwork. I made new sides, flanged it on the edge, rolled the seam on the top, and it's all silver. I've just got to peel the plastic off of this. I don't like the look of silver ductwork. All of this is going to be completely taken apart. I'm going to take it next door to my other building. I'm going to use some Sim Prep Solve and some trim black, wipe it down, and paint it. I don't like the look of bare aluminum. After a while, the aluminum oxidizes and it gets a flat sheen to it. I think it's kind of ugly. I like the look of the black, and it kind of fades away the seams on the ductwork when you take a glance at it. So what we're gonna do now is take all this stuff next door and I'm gonna paint it. And when I come back, it'll be dry and we're gonna start installing this in the car. What I'm doing now is just using some simple 1/8 inch countersunk rivets to hold my grill bezel into the nose. They just countersink and they fit nice and flush in there so that my grill screen itself can fit flush with the nose. I put a backup washer on it because it's 2 pieces of fiber being held together, composite inlet grill and a composite bumper cover. So you want to back that up with a washer to make sure it doesn't pull through or fall out. Lock that in place. Pull this cleco out. We'll do the same thing here. And then we can move on to actually mounting the grill. We can mount the grill screen, we can mount the radiator ductwork. Next step is actually mounting the ductwork to the radiator pan. And then we'll get the radiator in. These lines that say 15 on it, that's for my nose ductwork for my brakes. The NASCAR rulebook says from the center line of the grill, your inlets for your brake cooling ducts can be no closer than 15 inches on center from the nose. So they're going to go out here and they will mount 2 on this side and 2 on the right side. These are 3.5s. They're going to mount here. And then I've got a 3-inch that's going to mount on the outside. Make it pretty simple. Keep it nice and easy. Up next, we're going to actually install our radiator ductwork. We'll slip this around the inlet bezel. And get it centered up here. I'll get some clecos to hold it in place. We'll stick 3 in there. We'll get this held in place, and then once we do, then I can actually get into adjusting the nose, the actual grill bezel inlets, and get those riveted in place. All that's held in place. Now I can center up the nose and I can see the rivets are lined up already, and I'll be right back. I intended on using some black rivets, but I only have the small head 1/8 inch, so I'm not going to use those. I'm going to end up going with the large ones, the same that we riveted the entire ductwork together with. So I'm going to use these on the nose bezel to the shroud itself and then to the radiator pan. So we'll get started with that. And then I'll use the little 1/8 inch washer from underneath to clamp it in place and hold everything down. It's kind of tricky getting behind it. I've already removed the splitter. 2, 3. Now this is really the tricky part, and that is getting behind the grill bezel to get a washer on here. Get everything squeezed together and pull it together. There we go. Like I said, this is the pain in the butt part. But you do it enough, you find a way to make it happen. Outstanding. Now I just have to drill 2 small holes in each side to connect the ductwork there. I did not pre-drill those because I did not know what the angle was going to be once I finally got it in. Now all of these, even though these are fresh holes that have been drilled, everything's getting a washer behind it. These washers on everything. There's no chance for it to fail at that point. And that is our ductwork installed. Next up, we're going to test fit the radiator again. Once we get the radiator in, then we'll come in and we'll seal this with some high temp weather strip. See how it sits in here, see how the grill and everything mount up, and we'll keep moving from there. And there's the center. Up next, we'll drill some mounting holes to mount the radiator to the shroud. These were old Camlock quick disconnect fasteners that were on it. We're not going to use those, but I am going to use these 2 holes and the ones that I've drilled already. I'm pretty happy with the way it's coming along so far. I think this is going to work excellent. And the way that I have the oil cooler set up, the line comes straight from my pump into the bottom of the oil cooler. It's going to come out of the top of the oil cooler. I'm going to move this mount for my oil filter housing and my oil filter temperature housing here. And then my main feed line, I'll have to shorten up, but it's going to come across right here, maybe even underneath, into my oil filter housing. So I've got to cut this off, take it to the shop and TIG weld it. Let's take our oil cooler and mock it up. This is one I got from PRW and it's been sonic cleaned. That's going to mount there. We'll take a hinge clip and hold it in place. And I'm very happy with the way that works. And like I said, my main oil line from the pump is going to come in right here at the bottom. I just need to cut it and get a straight put on it, crimp that, and then my out will come here, my oil filter mount. My oil filter housing, I will move to this side and it will come straight out of the radiator up into here with a 120, and then I will put a crimp a 90 on here and we'll go straight into there. Move more weight to the right side of the car versus the left and try and even it up. Up next, I'm going to make an upper mount here that's going to be reinforced. I'm going to go from in between my 2 hood hinges back to the edges of the radiator, make an aluminum plate that goes here with a small break on it to contour the edge of my hood pin bar and put a couple dimple dies in it, and that will hold the back edge of the radiator just like the radiator shroud is holding the front edge. So I'm going to get some template paper. I'm going to measure this out, make up a template, bend up a piece of 040, and then we can through drill all of this and make it one piece. So what I'm going to do now is just measure across the top here, which is 24, between my hood pins, which is 18, and then I'm going to get a rough estimate of 7 1/4. And I will draw that out on this paper. And I will make a piece that comes from here to here. It's going to need a slight break, so the top of it will have a crown on it, and I'll break it here. This will go straight back at an angle, and I think I'll put three 3-inch dimple dies in there, maybe even 4. Find the center line and maybe even put 2 on each side. But that's what we're going to do next. We'll make that template, and then the back side of this radiator, once I remove the oil cooler, I'm going to put some 1032 floating nut plates in here to hold everything together. So let me concentrate on that template first. So I've cut out a simple template of what I want to go here. We'll pull these clecos out, and I will actually get the oil cooler out of the way. Will it stay? Actually, it'll stay. So we'll just move this out of the way. I'll take my template and see how it actually fits. I have to break that a little bit more. So this is going to come into here, and that's going to fit on the back of the radiator. And I believe I can get that clipped into place. Let me grab 2 more clips. Here's one. What I'm going to do just to get the template to work is I'm going to slide it in between the radiator and the oil cooler. Just push that out a little bit. Slide that back in. Trace the top. And we're about a 1/4 inch long on the back side. Not bad. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark here. And we're going to drill this. We're going to drill this with 3 1/8-inch holes. And we're going to mount this here first, put some clecos in it, and that way, once I do, I'll be able to get the angle correct and then mark the back edge of it. And like I said, we are about a 1/4 inch long. There's a nice black mark. We can pull that off. Where did I put my pliers at? Right here. Now this is the cardboard template that I made yesterday. We're going to remove this. I'm going to show you the piece that I fabricated today before I left the shop. This is my finished product. It's a simple piece of 032 aluminum that I put some 4-inch dimple die holes in, backed up with some 1-inch holes between them. It's a simple piece. It looks a lot better than just an open space. It adds some structural rigidity to the hood pin bar, and it ties everything into the radiator. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove this after I mark my mounting holes for 1032s. I've already installed some 1032 nut plates in my radiator flange to tie everything together. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to blow this all apart, and I think I'm going to leave this piece bare aluminum. We're going to use some automotive racing grade weather strip to seal all the way around the aluminum radiator ductwork to the actual radiator core. It's based off a silicone product. It's not your usual home improvement store stuff. So we're going to pull all this apart. We're going to mount our radiator to the back side of our oil cooler on the engine side. It's going to be a puller fan. I've got a 14-inch Spall fan that I'm going to use. So we're going to pull all this together. We're going to mount the radiator cooling fan there. We're going to drill this. We're going to tie it all in. Okay, my friends, let's talk about some weather stripping. I've got 3 different rolls of weather stripping in front of me. All of them are race car grade. All of them come from SRI. You can see the decal on the front of them. And all of them have silicone in the chemical makeup of this foam. These are not your typical home improvement store window foam strips. This is not something that you would use to keep the wind and rain out of Pawpaw's Pontiac. We're going to seal our radiator oil cooler to our coolant tank on the radiator. When you have a radiator tank that gets to 220 degrees and an oil cooler tank that gets to 235 plus, that home improvement stuff will melt right out. You cannot use just regular window stripping on this. This stuff goes up to, I think, 375 degrees that I've seen some people use this and not have a problem with it distorting or melting out. Also, beware, just because it says silicone doesn't mean you can mount your radiator together and just go squeeze home improvement clear silicone all over everything. That's going to make a mess, it's going to be unsightly, and you're going to have big problems with it. What we are going to do is we're going to use this to seal our radiator ductwork from the radiator to that flange, and we're going to bolt that together. Once the ductwork is secured to the radiator, we're going to install our oil cooler. But before I can mount this, I have to put my Spall fan on here. We will mount that to the radiator with 1032 nut plates, and then we'll put our brace on it. Right now I'm going to install my radiator grill screen with some 1032s. This came off of one of the 20 cars, our buddy at Joe Gibbs, and we're going to reinstall this one. The one that was on here is kind of ugly. I didn't really like it, so we're going to use this one. Come on, buddy. What are you doing? What are you doing? I got work to do, bro. And that'll seal against our tank. Now this piece on the bottom is going to seal the lower portion of my flange, and it's also going to act as an isolator for the radiator to sit on rather than being metal to metal. Now up here on the top of this flange is not going to touch a hot spot of the radiator, so we're going to use a bead of black weather strip across there. We're going to foam that, we'll cut notches in it for the hardware, and then we'll set the radiator in. What are you doing, bud? What are you doing, huh? Now my gap is even all the way around. You don't want to squish this until the weather stripping is popping out. You want even tension all the way around so that it seals, and under race conditions it has a little bit of room to move. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to put some weather strip on the inside edges of my radiator oil tank right here. We're going to mount these on the inside. Then we're going to put our fan Then we're going to put our fan on the radiator, oil cooler. This is my engine oil cooler setup. It's an external air-to-air oil cooler, and we're going to be using a high-flow SPAL fan mounted directly to the rear of it as a puller fan, not a pusher. We've got cold air blowing in from our radiator inlet duct, hitting the front of the actual radiator inlet tanks. It's going to blow through the radiator, air is going to come through here, and we're going to pull it even harder with this puller fan. This is a 14-inch SPAL curved vane fan. I had a couple of these brand new in the box, so I figured why not use one. We're going to wire it with the blue as a ground and the black as our positive so that the motor runs in reverse and pulls air through the actual oil cooler. We're going to mount it with a simple fluidine mounting kit. It comes with 4 little tabs for the isolators that hold it on. I'm going to add 4 more because I don't like the way the teeth on these rub against the radiator fin. So we're going to isolate it that way. So we're going to get this mounted, everything stuck in the car, and finish this up. I'm happy with the way it looks. We'll trim them off with a set of flush cuts. And I'm sure many of you are wondering, looking at this, why I use the clip this way. For one reason, the round portion does not fit well with this SPAL fan, but the tab that does on the back fits very well. This is a fluidine mounting kit. This is a SPAL fan. They're not designed to work together. I like the way this looked better. Secondly, the clip on the back, the tension clip, if you look at it, it doesn't come past the edge of the tank. On top of that, the fins are recessed on my radiator behind the edge of the oil tank and mounting surface, almost ½ of an inch. So measuring from here and there, I've got almost a full inch of clearance in between the two. So I'm not worried about these clips touching the front of my radiator, rubbing a hole in anything. I like the way it looks. I like the way that came out. This is going to go over to a mounting point. We're going to have a Deutsch connector clip on here. The reason I'm not doing plumbing on this car yet or anything to do with electrical is everything mechanical is going to be completely done. Everything's going to be mounted where it needs to be. That way I know exactly what length I need to make every hose and what length I need to make every wire and where every Deutsch connector is going to go. That lets me know, hey, maybe if I move my oil filter here or if I mounted something, a fan or a switch or a relay somewhere else, then I'm not in the middle of chopping up a harness and rerouting something. Everything's going to be exactly where it goes, from rear end cooler to driver blower fan to brake fans to radiator fan. Every piece of wiring, every gauge and instrument that's going to need it is going to be in the place it needs to be before I start. Same thing's going to go with plumbing. Fuel line, brake lines, everything in between. That's the way I'm going to do it. I've got the weather strip installed on my oil cooler, and it's in place and against my radiator. It's going to be held in place at the bottom with the flange, and on top I'm using some 1032 flange nuts, and I'm putting a 3/16 backup washer behind it. A lot of people message me and ask me all the time, where do you get those little high-speed aluminum NASCAR washers? They're nothing special, believe it or not. They're just aluminum rivet backup washers. You can get them in 1/8 inch, 3/16, and 1/4 inch, depending on where you look. It's pretty simple. We're going to bolt this in place. We're going to rivet this down and wrap it up. Now I'll remove my clecos, add my rivets one at a time, and we're finished. We'll start in the center and work our way out. These are simple steel shank large head 1/8" washers. There's nothing special about them. You can buy them by the box of 1,000 at SRI, and that's what I do. So that's it, my friends. The radiator installation is done. As you can see, our CNR radiator is installed, spall fan, fluidine oil cooler. I've made that custom upper mount to tie it to our hood pin bar with the dimple dies in it. And as you can see, down here, we've created all new ductwork that mounts to our grill inlet flange. Everything's been 1032 or riveted with a backup washer, as you can see. And I've custom made this radiator pan that my radiator sits on. It's installed, but it's not wired, and we're going to get to the wiring probably near the end of this build. This has only taken about 10 times longer than it normally would for me because I did it in a YouTube video. I've come to the conclusion of this video, and I'm going to answer some questions that I've received from many of you simply through Instagram, Facebook Messenger, and general inquiries at the bottom of these videos. I printed out a list real quick. I'm going to knock those out. In our next video, we're going to get back on the Supra. It's not going to be 7 months, and we're going to put the fuel system in it. I have a brand new fuel-safe fuel cell that I ordered. I'm going to change the fill plate. We're going to run the fuel line, and we're going to get the fuel system completed. That's going to be in the next video. I am going to Florida, so it may be 2 weeks. Come on, bud, you're killing me. If y'all haven't seen him on social media, this is Rusty. Somebody dumped him at the end of the road here. We live out in the country. I rescued his ass. He's a great cat, but he is a pain in the butt. He will not leave me alone. He's a love bug, follows me everywhere I go, everything I work on, and just like this, he will not get out of the way. So, Kadzan asks, are you going to update the belts and the seat mount? Yes. The seat mounts, I'm making brand new seat rails for this car. It's getting an SFI LaJoy road course seat, and I'm changing the belts themselves to an 8-point pickup system. What does that mean? It means that the upper belts, your shoulder harnesses, they are actually 2 belts on each side. The lower belt crosses your chest, that holds you in the car. Another belt bolts on over the top of that, holds your Hans device. So those are 4 points. Your general lap belts, that's 2 more, and it's got a dual sub belt, which goes down between your legs. That makes it 8. So yes, I am. What brand am I going to use? I'm not sure yet. I believe I'm going to go with Schroet. I have them in my Hamlin car, and I have them in my truck. I like them. I think they're a good product. They're something I kind of favor myself. The next one, Rick Kroll. Is there a carbon floor pan that will fit a Gen 4 car that you are aware of? Yes, there are tons of them out there on the market. They're made by several people. Depending on your car, for it to be error correct, you have to look at old photos for references. Many teams back in the day, the early introduction of carbon, had 1 company or 2 company make them, like Fiberworks or Kinney's Components. Many teams like Hendrick and Roush made their own. Roush Composites, there's a whole division that Roush makes stuff for their composites. New Gen 7 greenhouses, the roof flaps, you name it, Roush makes a lot of it. Brake ducts, oil cooler ducts. I have several Kinney's Components carbon floors. This is one of them. This came out of a Gibbs Xfinity car, actually an older Nationwide car, about 2012. This is a 3-piece unit. The sides, cam lock on, sits on the floor, isolates heat from the floor, and there's an air gap underneath it. This one's going in the Supra. I've already trimmed it and it fits perfect. But yes, several used parts houses have them, and you can find them and make a pattern, cut it and trim it to fit your floor. Richard Gilliam, 4334. Are there Speedway frames the same as the road course frame? If not, does NASCAR require the difference? So it depends on the era of the car. Gen 4 and older, we're speaking 2007 and prior COT stuff. There were road course specific and Speedway specific cars. They had raised right rails, offsets, some were symmetrical, some were not. If you look at the super Speedway cars, they have a real tall nose on them for downforce. Come on, bud, you're killing me. And the road course cars have big flared fenders on them for clearance and cutting the air out. When you get to 2007 and you get into this era of the car, this car was built in 2007 by Joe Gibbs. It was originally a Chevrolet COT car with a Chevrolet body. In 2008, when Kyle Busch came aboard, they went to Toyotas, but that was originally began its life as a Tony Stewart car. Tony Stewart ran it 1 race, and then it got cast off to the new, younger Denny Hamlin and became a number 11 FedEx car. It actually ran a couple races as a FedEx car with the lower air dam on it, but the chassis under this car is the same chassis that went from 2007 all the way to 2021 in the Cup Series. The architectural design was the same. Had double frame rails on the left, floor pans were the same. The only thing they did was update a few bars. And by doing that, they added a couple horizontal bars. They've also thickened the floor pan. When you looked at some of the crashes that were out there, like what's his name, Kyle Larson had in the 32 car where it ripped the floor pan out. And if you look at the Austin Dillon crash where it ripped the floor pan out at Daytona as well. Also the newer Newman bars over on the left rear between the A or the B and C post, they've added those as well. So they've been updated, but they're still being currently run in the Xfinity series with a composite body on them. Those chassis are all symmetrical. The only difference you'll really see between a road course and say an intermediate track or a Michigan 2-mile car is, you done? Is the actual front end pickup points and the geometry. Other than that, everything's pretty much in the same place. They might move the track bar a little bit. You can practically take any COT car from 2007 to 2021, including the current Xfinity cars, and make them a road course car with minimal effort. Changing control arms, changing spindles. You can get it damn near close for what an average Joe in a Trackday car can do. That lays out. I could go much further into that, but I'm not. It's something that's been beat to death. Let's see. Happy Wrenching 960. Man, I like your channel. Thanks, I appreciate it. Cool stuff. Is the Supra sold already? No, and I'm not going to sell it for great reason that I'll get into in another video. The stuff that you see me sell or stuff I see posted for sale, question I get all the time, where do you list it? Can you send me a list? No, I don't list it anymore. I haven't since COVID, honestly. Reason being is most of my business is word of mouth and I deal directly with people in the industry. I do have customers outside that have never worked in the industry that buy stuff from me. Message me, ask questions, cash in hand and have a truck ready and we can make deals on stuff. That's how I work. I used to advertise, but I would get 900 questions. And if you've ever dealt with anybody on Facebook Marketplace, you know how horrible it can be. Chassis, rolling, $4,000. Oh, you're ripping me off. That's a rip-off. You're a scammer, this, that. Will you deliver it? I mean, it's ridiculous, so I quit doing it. People that are seriously interested, contact me directly. Do I give out a list of everything I have? No, and I never will, because just like the government, it's nobody's business. If you're interested in something, message me, give me an idea of what you're looking for and a budget that you have, and I will let you know if I have or know of anything that could fit those parameters. Come on, bud. You fell off here. You knocked my floor pan over. You're killing me. Interesting that you have a Toyota car. This comes from Mike Hatch and truck, but that you measure fractions and inches and speak of threads and bolts in SAE, not metric. Is this common in the industry? I think your channel is great. Well, thank Mike. I appreciate it. And yes, just about everything on these cars, despite whether it being a Toyota, Chevrolet, Ford, practically every single thing on these vehicles is SAE in inches. I think there are a few specific things with the McLaren EFI system and stuff like that on the very new car that comes in metric, literally like 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, small stuff, finite hardware. But generally all these cars, you'll see 1/2 inch, 3/4, 5/8. And then when you get into some of the smaller stuff, it's 1032, 832, 632, smaller hardware like that. Good question. Ian Houston, 2426. Hello, Danny. What engine are you using? That really depends on the car and the era. Denny Hamlin car has a phase 14. Truck has a phase 14. Two in the back have phase 9, phase 10s. I have a couple phase 11 and 14s over there, but the Supra itself is getting a phase 14. Toyota phase 11, phase 14, they look similar. One of the big giveaways is what side the oil pump's located on and the cylinder head design. Those are some of the big things. Round exhaust port, square exhaust port. If you're versed in this stuff, you'll pick it up. The Hendrick car back there in the corner is one of the only Chevrolets I have. I have that one in an RCR car. That one's going to get an R07, and I just made a deal for an SB2 for the Harvick car that I picked up recently. I don't have any Ford or Dodge stuff. I sold all of that off. A gentleman in Maryland bought everything I had, Dodge, all 3 cars, parts, pieces, everything when I was sick a couple years ago. I sold all that stuff off and haven't looked back. I did buy a bunch of stuff from a buddy at Roush when I was doing work and deals over there, and I've since sold out every single thing, and I'm sticking to Toyota. The Toyota topic is something I get asked a lot from people, and I think I'll go in depth to that and how I got started in racing and what I've done in racing in an entire video on its own. Next question. What is the different super speedway versus road course headers? So when it comes to headers, there are a finite number of designs when it comes to headers and material. The headers that are on the Supra, they're made of Inconel. They're from Profab. I think each header weighs something like 19 ounces. Like, it's super lightweight. And then I have some super speedway headers for the same style engine, same exhaust port, but the tube diameter is 2 1/8, 2 1/2, and it goes to a 4.5 inch collector. They're made out of stainless steel. They're for a speedway car, get the weight down low. And depending on the engine builder, RPM range, torque levels, where they want the car to run, it's just like a drag car. There are infinite combinations specific to the engine combination that you're running. Is it a road course short track? Is it high RPM super speedway? The number of combinations is infinite. Header length, collector length, oval tubing, round tubing. It gets really ridiculous, but it's been scienced out. I have a ton of that stuff in boom tubes, and generally when I get an engine or I have an engine built, the engine builder will give you a book. Many of the times they'll ask you to bring 3 or 4 sets of headers. Sometimes I show up at 4 or 5. They'll run a couple of them on the engine while they're tuning the carburetor and figure out where peak horsepower works and what I want out of the engine. Do I want a good road course engine that's going to build good torque off the corners? You might go with a smaller diameter header. If it's going to be something like a wide open throttle standing mile car, then you'd go with something with a big tube on it. Good question. Let's see. Gray Mouser ran 1959. How can I attend your track days? That is a question I get quite a lot. I don't host the track day. My good friend Bill Ryan does. The way we do it, it's a customer appreciation track day. Many of you may or may not know that I do a lot of work with Bill Ryan. He's a good friend of mine from all the way back in the 1990s Hialeah Speedway days. He's a great guy, known him a long time. It's more or less a customer appreciation day. Cars we built, cars we've sold, cars we've restored on, and good friends. Is it open to the public? No, it is not. If you're not on the list, you're not going to get in the gate. That's just how it works. Why? Because we serve breakfast and we serve lunch. The way it goes, we typically show up the night before and stage everything. If you can't, you show up the morning thereof, about 6 a.m. We load in, park, everybody gets a garage stall. We set up tables, flat iron barbecue. We make breakfast, race for 4 or 5 hours. Right around noon, track goes cold. Everybody, including the paramedics, the fire guys, track crew, everybody, we have a barbecue for about an hour at lunch. Then we run until 5 o'clock wide open again. That's how the track day goes. Like I said, no, it's not open to everybody because we calculate the amount of food. Insurance only covers a certain amount of cars and a certain amount of people that come there. He has an underwriter. Everything we do is theirs insured. It's not like some groups that like to find and call track days piggybacking off somebody at Rockingham, and they show up and they have no insurance and you pay somebody else to get in. That stuff's a mess. We stay away from stuff like that. That's why we hold private track days. And the last question here. What type of spark plug do you run in your engines? I saw some photos where you had surface gaps. Do you run anything else? No. So there are 2 types of spark plugs that I run in the engines that I have. One is Brisk. I don't know if many of you have ever seen the Brisk spark plug company. They make great racing plugs. The second one is Champion. They also make great surface gap plugs. I do not run an exposed electrode spark plug that has a little tab hanging off of it where you clearance it. These engines, they have a very small combustion chamber. Some of them as little as 30 cc's, and it has a flat top piston. They make 12.5 to 14:1 compression, depending on whether it's an open motor or a motor I've had built. There's not a lot of room in there for an electrode to be hanging out. The other reason with a surface gap plug, you do not have to index the plug and make sure that the electrode finger on the end of the spark plug doesn't hit anything. Surface gap plug, you put it in, tighten it down, off you go. All you have to worry about is the heat range of the spark plug and adjusting the timing of your car. That's a great question. I appreciate it. If you guys have more questions, comment below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a little clunky and it was shot over a period of probably 4 or 5 days, but I was very busy. I don't know if many of you have seen it over the winter. I did a lot of body updates for Toyota. I've done a lot of work for Toyota and I enjoyed doing it, and updated a bunch of cars, and it was really a big crunch, and that is one of the reasons a lot of this didn't get worked on. So until next time, I'll see you guys again soon.